this is the local panchayat, the panchayat ghar in the village that has a pakka building now. But there is no Gram Sabha, not a single Gram Sabha has happened. Gram Sabha, that is the all village adults meeting and voting on anything or discussing. Not a single meeting, except maybe the one I tried when I had given some computers to the village. So I said, let's have a Gram Sabha. But it just doesn't happen. So this notion that which L.C. Jain had, decentralization will bring about or Rajni Kothari, all his life he talked about this. This was ignoring this huge lack of cultural capital for it. At least in these regions, I'm sure it is. There are silver patches. There is Anna Hazare. There is Hirve Bazar. There are some villages which are reporting very good work, but UP, Bihar, I am very doubtful. Maybe this is the general picture. Even Gram Sabhas just don't meet at all. So everything is decided by the Pradhan, and that is why there is so much stake in getting elected as a Pradhan. And some of this I have already mentioned. I'd like to report my own domestic help's experience with getting a ration card. Her jhuggi was demolished. This is in Delhi. Her name is Anu. Her jhuggi was demolished in 2005 in Ashok Vihar. You must be remembering that there was a spree of slum clearances at that time under court orders, and then also in the follow up to the Commonwealth Games. So since then she doesn't have a proper ration card. She has a slip. And she has been running to these SDM office and what is very revealing is she told me, despite the help that I am trying to give to her, she said it would have been better had they taken a bribe. She spends about 15 rupees on rickshaw, 20 rupees on bus for one visit, and 2 to 3 hours it takes to the SDM office in Rampura. This is the stonewalling that the local bureaucracy does. Meanwhile, her husband had expired. She needs a death certificate because she can get a pension. I know how much we had to struggle. Now she has a widow's pension. But I think Modi is right on this. Transparency, accountability, digitizing. This is extremely important. This Indian bureaucracy. And I will add one suggestion here. I am a part of this bureaucracy. I know things don't work. In fact, I'll just exaggerate, but to make a point, I sometimes feel I'm wasting 3 years of my undergraduate students. Will this kind of knowledge help them in their lives? And when will we sit together to just do a radical rethink about it? It will never happen. One little change could help. Our annual increment should not be automatic. In fact, in rules, it is not automatic. But this is how we sabotage rules. Everyone by right gets an increment. If just this, I don't say throw away people from jobs for non-performance, no. But at least stop the increment. Then what will happen is, those who want to work will be able to ask others that because of you, I am also going to lose. Even this is not happening right now. I want to work, but who will dominate the office? Those who are not working, because they have the time to do all the politicking and ganging up, and it's a very self-defeating system. So some of these service rules maybe could help. I've mentioned about this government schooling, how Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, rise of infrastructure, etc. Actually, I took a test, in the private school and in the government school. There was no zero scorer in the private school. And of course, there were many more students available for taking the test. And 33% only failed in the private school. 75% failed or scored less than 33. It was a mixed, simple maths, simple GK, we held a test. As I said, the salary of the school teacher in government school is 10 times that in the private school. So these are the ironies. Lastly, on agriculture, you must be aware, state now provides a number of subsidies to agriculture. Tax is of course gone. Tax is only over 3, if you have more than 3 acres of land, you have to pay 22 rupees per annum. That is the low level of tax on agriculture. Others don't have to pay at all. On the other hand, the state provides not only minimum support price to most of the crops, not major crops, not all. Then it gives subsidies on seed, on diesel, on fertilizer, and all this adds up to about 2 lakh crores per annum in 2000. This is a 2011 figure. Yet, what is the earning from the field? I did a detailed count. I don't know if I have that chart. Sorry, that table is not there. I did a detailed count. How much do you get from an acre? If there is optimal rain, normal weather, the farmer gets from 1 acre, which is, what is the price of 1 acre? 50 lakh rupees is the price of 1 acre in Dhantala today. Next to the road, maybe 30, 25 lakhs interior of the village. But what is the earning? 4,000 rupees per month. About 48,000 from 2 crops per annum, or 4,000 rupees per month if everything is normal. There is normal rain, there is irrigation available, and all these subsidies are available. Now 4,000 rupees per month, and average it will come to around 2,000 rupees per month. So whatever you put into this agriculture, you cannot get adequate income, a decent income, unless a lot of people move out of agriculture. In USA, the average size of a field is 180 hectares. 180 hectares. In India, it is 1.1 hectare. 2011 figure. Must be less now. In 1.1 hectare, even if you distribute equally, you will earn just about 5,000 rupees under optimal conditions. The only way out is non-farm work has to grow in the village itself. And that can happen only through some push to industrialization, rural industrialization, feeder industries for large plants, etc. That can make a difference. For further research, I have got 2 suggestions. As I said, one is this district level monitoring we must have of what I call privations. Plus, we need to perhaps do some pilots on the voucher alternative, because these schemes should not be implemented in one go, but maybe I'm not fully aware if already some pilots have been done, but that approach should be the way out. And for policy, as I've already mentioned, some huge neglects, especially health environment, not just providing hospitals and dispensaries, but addressing this menacing, alarming pollution levels, contamination of food chain, fake medicines and fake doctors. These are very, very important issues crying out for immediate attention. And skilling is very important. As a teacher, I feel most of the school students don't have an academic bent of mind, and even if you are going to become a professor, you must have a skill. Maybe photography, maybe painting, but some skill everyone should cultivate, and it should be a part of not what PM Modi is doing, Kaushal Vikas Kendra, setting up whole new network of ill-funded, poor infrastructure, In 1 and 2 rooms I have seen in Hudson Line, they have opened a Kaushal Vikas Kendra. They hardly have any infrastructure. But within schools and colleges, this can be done. Using that same infrastructure, every student should be mandatory for them to learn some skill, and not just professional skills, but music. When will you learn? It's such a beautiful thing. Anything of your choice in the arts, it should be a compulsory thing. There's too much of stress on textual knowledge, and the 3-hour exam is a horrible damage to the youth. I'll end here and look forward to your ruthless criticisms. Thank you.
May as well open the question anyways. You can ask them both for clarification as well as Please switch on the microphone.
So I have two questions for clarification. The first one is, you've said that the wage rate in the villages has gone up, right? So from 5 kgs of wheat, it has gone up to 16, 17. On the other hand, you're also saying that income from agriculture has actually come down, right? So today a farmer can only expect something around 48 to 50,000 rupees per month. So that means that there would be an increase in non-farm income, right? So where is this increase in income coming from? There is another question, but I mean, after you answer.
You may as well usually take about 3 or 4 questions together, so please go ahead.
Okay. The second is, so in your opening statements, you said that in terms of our governance in the country, right? It's we are adding new entitlements, etc. Right. So there was like Panchayati Raj that had come in. Panchayati Raj Act that has come in, right to food, etc. that has come in, right to income that has been accepted. On the other hand, what I also heard you say is that the safety and security actually has gone down and deteriorated, right? And in the slide that you presented, you said even 2 pradhans were murdered out of 12. Do you see that this safety, and there is rise of this political cadres, right? So do you see that link to governance? So are you saying that while formally our country is trying to have better standards in governance, or I don't know, I mean, how would you like to link it? But informally, the quality of governance in the country has actually, or in practice, the quality of governance is actually going down. I mean, would you agree with that kind of a statement, or questions?
Wait, just hang on a second. We'll take a couple more questions from here. Then. If you can please come up to the microphone, that'll be. If you can just excuse me. You can just come up to the microphone, please.
Related question is the political competition in the village. Does it have any implications for the governance and development? Like SP, BSP, Congress, and based on the caste identities.
So, although we see that poverty is decreasing, I was wondering if there's any information about inequality and a change in today's. Also, I'm just curious, I think I didn't get this part, but when you say that the calorie intake is increasing, how is that possible if it's roti chutney, from roti chutney to pulses and vegetables? Just a clarification.
Wage rate, you very rightly got it, has gone up. I didn't say agricultural income has come down. Agricultural yields have also gone up, and minimum support price has gone up hugely, especially in the UPA rule. 600 rupees was the support price for wheat in 2004. It was raised to 1300 rupees by 2014, 13 or 14. Almost more than doubled. So agricultural incomes have gone up, but they were much worse earlier. On the other hand, the land fields were bigger. So the gain that came in agricultural yields have continued to improve very slowly. They jumped suddenly in the 60s when HYVs came. Through the 70s there was good rise. Then they have been inching up. New seeds are still coming up. So yields are rising. Minimum support price, at least under the UPA, rose very well, and farmers are unhappy today with Modi on this front. I've been talking to them, and they are very unhappy that the MSP rise has been completely ignored by the Modi government. So agricultural income was going up, but even then it would not have sufficed in raising the wage. Why did wage rise? Because migration has increased. As I said, slum has quadrupled in the same period. Village has contracted since 2006. And overall, in the 25 years that I've studied, only a 30% rise. Because migration is happening. And this is pushing up the wage within the village, because enough laborers are just not available. And this is a common complaint of the better off farmer. They have to pay much more. They call nafri. The woman farm labor is called nafri in this village. And they say they are hardly available. And I actually counted, their number has hugely come down in the village. Because when either they go out or just the husband has gone out and his money order is coming, or now there can be a electronic transfer also. But they the first thing they do, if they can afford it, is to withdraw from laboring on somebody else's farm. You know, I like to mention here one thing. One Gurjar farmer told me, why are the Jatavs more educated than the Valmikis? He said because they have our genes in them, because their women used to work on our farms. That is the level of horrendous exploitation that was happening. That is why Dalit is always keen to first pull out the woman from farm work. Now, next question was, entitlements have improved, but safety has gone down. Actually, there is no contradiction in this. First of all, entitlements have improved on paper. As I said, I gave the example of right to education. It's a huge implementation mess. Actually, learning outcomes have gone down after you raise the expenditure on education from 1.5% of GDP to 3% of GDP. But the learning outcomes have gone down further, because the implementation is a different story altogether. And secondly, I was precisely saying that we are neglecting safety issues. I don't know why. I have got two explanations. I tried to think about this. Why does CPR or included don't reflect on the safety issue so much? One reason could be that we have a structuralist bias. We tend to think of, underlying causes, larger structural factors, class inequality, this, that. The basic governance issue does not attract, theoretical focus. And second reason is, I think, that this is seen as something of a rightist agenda. Governance to rightist ka agenda hai. Left should think about inequality and, deeper, which are more difficult to change things. The simple ones are not. This is a basic governance issue. And we need to cry about it, because this is causing a lot of suffering on the ground. Imagine a father whose daughter has been gang raped and the rapists are living next door. He cannot do anything. As I mentioned, UP murder rate is 2.4. India is 2.6. I counted 20 murders in this population. That also there is a helplessness. The party cadres are very scared of mobilizing on this issue. I can talk here in New Delhi. But to do it in UP is a different ballgame altogether. These party cadres need to be taken up. We'll have to do it collectively. It can be done. And firstly, of course, we need greater data, voter alertness. Such parties should be campaigned against, and there is no contradiction in the two. Yeah, you're asking about the implications for party competition. I would like to report here, definitely when Mayawati came to power, I really admire her on this. Crime rate, everyone says, came down. She had much better discipline on her party cadres. As I was saying, it is not just the caste dynamics, the class dynamics, but the party cadres acting as a new power axis, which Craig Jeffrey and all are perhaps not capturing. And BSP was much better on this. This is widely acknowledged in the village, especially for Dalits, of course, but even generally. They always say that when SP comes to power, the crime situation is very bad. And which is actually not mysterious or difficult to explain. When Mulayam Singh himself is saying such things, you know, one student reported to me that in his college Mulayam Singh had come, and he said the first thing to the students, छात्रों किताबें सब अलग कर दो, तुम मेरे साथ आओ, पास कराना मेरा काम है. This he said openly. This was reported to me by a student from the Kharkhoda Junior Inter College. You asked, has inequality grown? Yes, inequality has grown, I won't deny, but not from farm income. In fact, zamindari is gone, the big land holdings are divided. Even the leftover landholders are drawing much more earning from non-farm work. They are into property dealing and loans and so on high interest rates, plus their political work. But farming is not the main source of income. That what Andre Bete in his 61 book had mentioned, that process had just begun. The overlap between caste, class and power, which he saw in that Tamil Nadu village in 60s, that has started cracking up at that time. That has advanced in a big way now. Caste, class and power don't overlap the way they did for centuries in this country. And inequality has gone up, but major incomes are not from land holdings. Secondly, I want to mention this. I asked a lot of people, there was a survey done in the village of what are your priorities, what should the government do, and I haven't brought the data here today. But inequality is not a major concern of people. Their concern is delivery. Maybe inequality, we are much more concerned about it despite being the elite, but our ideological training disposes us to seeing it as a major issue. For villagers and slum dwellers, my survey suggests, I'm not very sure, this needs to be followed up, but my feeling is that it is not a major concern for them. They don't mind if a money is too rich or people are drawing salaries in lakhs, and what they are concerned is electricity, drinking water, law and order, unemployment. Unemployment they are concerned about, and they look forward to the state. This point I forgot to mention. State is important for them. They don't dismiss the state the way some people do here in the academia. State is very important for them because, why is it important? Because we must see NGOs are not working. On the ground they are not visible. In Aradak Nagar there are 4-6 NGOs on paper, they are doing some little bit of work, but they have trained some tailors and hardly anything. In Dhantala there is no NGO, they don't know of any NGO. Similarly, the Gram Sabha is not working. Their own community is not able to do self-help. Even dustbins, even litter, we are not able to dispose of. That culture is lacking. Then the third source could have been the radical political parties, again not visible. Even in Delhi, where you have JNU, you have Jamia, even a councillor's election, it's only AAP which saw that without money and muscle power you can win, but whether it will sustain, we don't know. This is partly perhaps because inequality is not a major issue for people on the ground. And calorie intake, what was the question? No, I was saying that national data shows that calorie intake, that means cereal intake, has come down. So certain economists made a huge hue and cry, but Drees, I think, had a very good article in EPW explaining that this does not mean that the food intake has come down. And that shows in the, I was looking at the detailed NSS data, vegetable intake has gone up, fat intake has gone up, pulses has protein has gone up. And it is natural when you are eating so many other things, then you will eat less of chapati. That is, and I have personally witnessed this. People just had chapati and a little chutney among Dalit households in 88. Now they are commonly having cooked vegetable or dal, or that improvement is visible. So naturally they'll take less of chapati. So that is leading to less consumption of calorie, which is a positive sign.
Devesh, one quick, when you're responding to the question on party competition, this whole issue of party cadres, is this the same group of people who switch across parties from election to election, or are there, and you mentioned that Mayawati had more control over the cadre and so on, or does each party have a different cadre that's relatively stable that you have seen from people in, let's say, since you've been looking at it since 88 onwards, what do you see on the ground?
It is a mixed. There are some people who switch, but it is not easy. The rest of the party won't take everybody easily. If somebody from other party coming in just after, just because you have won an election. So it's a mix. Some at the lower level, some boys you will find in switching sides at the time of election. Sometimes they are working for the Congress party, sometimes they are working for BSP. But some steady membership is there, and they don't encourage this switching that easily. So there are, is party ka gunda hai, is party ka, that phenomenon is there. And also there is some caste bases are different.
You've made a very strong argument about, the need to take ruling party cadres as a new power group and to move away from caste and the caste class power trichotomy. I'm wondering to what extent, and my sense is it varies from state to state and region to region, to what extent the rise of the party cadre as a member of a new power group actually is also linked to caste. I mean, my sense certainly is in Tamil Nadu that is very much the case. Shiv Sena in Mumbai may be more towards what you're saying. So it's certainly not a uniform thing, and I don't think we should stop viewing caste as an important, I don't think we should stop obsessing about caste, to put it sort of dramatically, personally. The second thing is a very small technical thing. You said begging is not seen as work by the census, you mean? Yeah, because local communities definitely see it as work. It's formally recognized as work. And the third thing was your recommendation of food vouchers. Of course, it's a very fraught issue with a lot of discussion, and one could argue that the state need not be paternalistic and so forth. But of course, the fear is of how the food voucher might be used, and whether we will move towards lower levels of nutrition, and I don't think we can have that discussion without looking at that.
Okay, yeah, sure. I was just commenting to what she said. Actually, he answered it himself. When he said that on one hand, the government has been increasing MSP, etc. If you look at the entitlements, well, one set of entitlements might have been limited to paper, but on the other hand, you yourself said PDS, subsidized LPG, Janani Suraksha Yojana, subsidized loans, etc. They have been very impactful. So what has been actually happening is that urban poor has been subsidized, right? And it's been basically at the cost of farmers. So how do you support farmers? Because if you leave the farm prices to the market, you don't know where they might end up. So what has been happening is that they are being subsidized by way of MSP. So PDS in a way very cleverly kind of helps in balancing both the sides. You increase MSP, you subsidize the farmers,
The whole story.
and you distribute at lower prices.
Could we have that discussion at perhaps another context?
Right.
There is a broader story there. Yes, Mr. Khanna.
No, there's something which of course has been widely noted and you referred to it, but since you spent so much time there and have close sort of had many opportunities to speak to people and close, why are formal jobs so much more demanded than non-formal, no matter what? Is it because of security, status, corruption possibilities, what? Which is, you have mentioned in that your abstract the communal factor, but in your presentation that disappeared. So I was just wondering, why should the communal tensions have increased?
There were one question. In state spending on health, tends to be a zero-sum game between family planning and spending on other kinds of health infrastructure. So, and a lot of policy professionals complain that the state spends too much on family planning and tends to neglect other health services. So, what I'm asking is, in your experience, is it the fertility rate that affects standards of living, or is it the other way around? Because the other way around is what demographic transition theory would suggest. But what have you seen?
Now, Harini, I'm not neglecting caste at all. Just that I was trying to add to it that this is a new power dynamics. In fact, my field, as I mentioned, 22% are Dalits in the village. And, they have a word for, I hope Vikas won't mind, but, they have a word for the oppression they faced till about 70s when the land had not been distributed, and the harassment from Gurjars. They call it Gurjar Gardi. They would pick up their buffalo and beat them up, and they can't wear a proper dress. That has definitely gone down. In fact, this village has some Gurjars who are members of BSP now. And there are one or two progressive educated Gurjars also who have built a library, and the relations have changed. But majority of Dalits are still most poor. There is that kind of overlap. There's a small cream which has produced some educated lawyers. There's a lecturer also who's a Dalit. They have benefited from reservations. But the large majority of Dalits are poor, definitely. So the caste factor is, I'm not negating. I'm just saying that there is a new power setup architecture which needs to be addressed, which we are neglecting, and that's why I mentioned. Yeah. Then begging, yes, I was just going by this NSS definition that this in fact comes under quasi-legal job. There is a little bit of ambiguity. It's not illegal. Right. It's a quasi-legal thing. In some areas they are not allowed to enter and so on. Similarly, prostitution, it's not illegal, but it's quasi-legal. So these people need to be counted. And in non-worker, we should not assume that there are just homemakers and students and old people. Non-workers have this huge segment of productive workers, but they are by our definition not workers. That was my point. Farmers, how their incomes can be bettered. See, I'll have 2 points. One I've already made, that lot of people need to move out of farming. This 1 hectare farm, and in fact many are marginal and sub-marginal farmers. We have in our census data small and marginal farmers. So many are sub-marginal, that is less than 1 acre and less than half acre, which means 2.5 biga, are maybe called petty holders. There are droves of them. They are not even mentioned. So this is unviable farming, and unless a lot of people move out of farming, it will not become prosperous farmers. We will not be able to see. In fact, Punjab, the average size is I think 4 hectares. Because a lot of sons are going out from each family. They move out. And this has been happening for a long time. Unless we encourage this in UP and Bihar also, this some marginal farming will not help. And another way farmers need to be helped is infrastructure. As I mentioned, irrigating a field by diesel pump is 5 times costlier than doing it by electricity. But electricity is not available. Similarly, cold chains are not there. So farmers can't think of floriculture, horticulture. They get just spoiled in hours. That supply chain, the cold stores, that infrastructure needs to be created. And I don't think government alone will be able to do it. We have not allowed private sector to enter these areas, like we have not allowed private sector into higher education. This is not required. We need public sector stream parallel, heavy investment in that. But don't chain private sector. I don't understand this. And public sector in any case delivery is so poor. Regulate them, monitor them. That should be the job of the state. But not stalling them. Commanding heights, we'll have this reserved for small scale. Small scale industries, khadi, just imagine what happened. They won't come up unless, like China, you have large scale industry. Then the feeder industry automatically comes up. But if you say we will reserve these products for this small scale, medium scale and so on, that is not viable in international competition. But if you allow Maruti, if you allow Vedanta, hordes of other small industries will also come up as their suppliers. This is the way to go. And farmers, the cold chain, etc., will also I think need help from private sector. Till now, I think Modi is right on this. Till now, we have been, since Nehru, looking at corporates as a suspect element, as something to be they'll create an hegemony. And look at Japan, look at South Korea. They had Mitsubishi. They got all the help from the state. It's not seen as corruption, because they create jobs as well as revenues, which then you can redistribute. We need progressive taxation and honest corporates, but not chaining the corporates, which now Modi is, I think, waking up to. I may have difference on that, but my feeling is that corporates have a role to play. Of course, they need to be monitored and regulated, but not chained in red tape or green tape as happened with UPA. We must ask this question: UPA brought in so many progressive laws. Why this total washout? Communal factor, yes, I'm sorry, I missed that, although the data was there. There have been communal riots on cricket matches in the neighborhood, not in this village. This village luckily has very good relations between Hindus and Muslims. There are about 10% Muslim population. Aradak Nagar doesn't have a Muslim population except 3 families, but in the neighborhood there is Nand Nagari and Dilshad Garden, Simapuri, which have a substantial, and you must be remembering Nand Nagari riots. That was over music, over a Jagrata. This, yeah, the first point is that this is worsening and it is alarming and it needs attention. Partly I would say this is party cadres again, party ideologies, and also our own cultural failures. This is what we just, we are shy of admitting. We do cut each other's throats on small disputes, on a love affair. This is a problem within the communities themselves. We need to honestly acknowledge this. Just saying that British provoked us, divided us, this is such a hollow explanation. Why can the British make us cut each other's throats? Or the politician does it? So I think there is a cultural problem also. There are antipathies, as I think Sudipta Kaviraj mentioned this long back in his 80s article. We are living together, but let's admit these are back-to-back existences. So there is syncretism, but at the same time, there is a problem. We can be provoked into violence against each other, and of course we need to build on this. Gandhi was a way out. We need some charismatic leaders who can get people together, get local leaders together, and that's why I think the importance of non-violence in his agenda, because he was actually telling a lie that non-violence is our tradition. Precisely because violence has been our tradition, he put non-violence on as agenda number 1, which was very important. And that is why in his agitations, children could go and come back alive. That was very, very important. But this is not just India. You must be knowing about Karachi, of course Aleppo. There has been cannibalism there. So that cultural capital issue is there. Health spending is a zero sum. I don't agree with that. It's 1.3% we are spending on health. In USA, which is maligned for its health, 16% of GDP is spent on health. UK, just on public health system, 10% of GDP, 1.3% is laughable. And this is the aid which the poor need much more, even more than food. A healthy man can earn his food. But somebody who's ill, disabled, old people, they need maximum help, and this is how the welfare state had begun under Bismarck, under labor rule, and we forgot this route. We just have, as I said, in the constitution, one single line in directive principles. And what amazes me, even the critics of the constitution did not take it up. This should be the agenda number 1 of the Indian state. Maybe not today, but in 10 years, 20 years, we'll spend so much of GDP on health and assured quality health care for everybody. Good old age pension for everybody. There was a question of fertility rate.
Mr. Khanna's question on demand for formal jobs. Is it?
Yeah.
Only
This is not very surprising actually. I don't. The formal job doesn't just bring security. It brings a network. You can bring your son in. You can bring your wife in. Yeah. And a lot of networking. A lot of very useful connections, because government servants have huge capacity to stall people's work. So everyone needs their help, and they help each other the most. And then you can have a marital relations, and it's a huge social and capital that you get along with the job, and of course safe old age.
Actually, I fully agree on certain points that you said. First of all is regarding family planning. That is must, and family planning not to kids, but rather time is coming when no kid. Another point, industrialization is very good, and I am fully in support of that. But one point I want to say, I want to ask, I am slightly confused. how are we going to use industrialized products in future? Because for example, Maruti was set up and Gurgaon developed because of that. Now they don't want to allow public to use cars in Gurgaon. Similarly, our present government that decides what we have to eat during what particular time. Then our culture minister decides what clothes should we wear. I mean, if you produce clothes like jeans and shirts, girls cannot wear them, those clothes. So where are we going to use? You are saying that we should have cold storages. Now our culture minister says, culture minister means our prime minister. I will also come to that because our prime minister said in the beginning that not even one minister can say anything without my permission. So I take it that whatever any minister is saying is Narendra Modi saying. Now, if you go by the record of our culture minister, something called Mahesh Sharma, I think something like that, and what Mr. Modi is talking, those are absolutely different things. To give a lecture in America is different than issuing dictates to public in India. So where are we going to use these things? And then another thing you said that digitalizing and this and that, first of all, intention should be honest. Intention, if intention is good, and industrialization is also successful only in those countries who have which have a powerful justice system. In India, we don't have any justice system. And what about when one industry fails and it takes down 10,000 crores? And what about today? I mean, most of the things are don't require any license or permit, but the industry is refusing to expand for the last so many years. Okay, previously they said there was lack of governance, there was policy paralysis. Now for more than 1 year, what type of paralysis do we have? We have a thought paralysis. There is no thought at all. So how are we going to do that? Yeah. So my question is, how are we going to use these industrial products?
Hi, thanks for the talk. You spoke of acute sufferings, and you also suggested that Amrita Sen's model of investment in healthcare and education wouldn't work to cure these acute sufferings. So what is your proposal, or do you have a set of ideas that would cure these acute sufferings in these rural areas?
Yes.
If you can just take a microphone, please.
The small question on morbidity, you said that morbidity, even though life expectancy is increasing, but morbidity rate is also going up, which is contrary. I think if the life expectancy goes up, the morbidity will also, in fact, going up of morbidity illustrates the success of, longer expectancy, because people will have more diseases as they age. So aging population will necessarily have more morbidity. So that's one small point which I thought.
Any further questions? If you can, in closing, Vijay, if you can just address, you studied a village sort of on the outskirts of Delhi and a slum inside Delhi, roughly over the same time frame. I mean, there's a lot of rich data in your study. I'm just trying to understand, if you were to summarize, relatively speaking, the kind of changes that you have seen in the urban slum versus the peripheral village, what would those differences in the relative story be? There's been change obviously in both places, but relatively speaking, what exactly would you see as your major differences?
This is a really question which I didn't touch upon, although I built a chart on comparing poverties in slum and village. I didn't include it here. The slum incomes have gone much more. As I said, there are 3 air conditioners in Aradhak Nagar now. Incomes have improved much more than in the village, but stench, congestion, morbidity, a very good example of morbidity. There are 3-4 people above 90 years in Dhantala village. There is nobody above 70 in Aradak Nagar except one person who has come off late after becoming old. He is Mangte Ram. His son died of electric shock in the village. He has shifted from the village to look after the grandson. But those who have been growing up here, morbidity is much more. So the different sufferings are different. Incomes are better in Aradak Nagar. The women work ratio is much better in Aradak Nagar. The demand for domestic helps not only increased, but the 80% of Aradak Nagar is Dalit. Most of them are Valmikis. They are being allowed in upper caste and middle class homes, even in some cases in kitchens now. This is a good change. On the other hand, the women's work participation has fallen in Dhantala. So I have a whole lot of these comparative charts, but the most important issues are these. That another thing is that at least there is an election of the Pradhan in Dhantala. Gram Sabhas don't meet, but under the 73rd amendment, surprisingly, when the population is roughly not very different, there is no provision of elected Pradhans in slums. We have straight councillors who sit over lakhs of people. These ward level and slum level representatives should be elected. This provision is lacking in the 74th amendment. So those are some of the differences.
You also mentioned that these families which got the land in 1984 as a result of this structures, that not all of them were able to, it was a mixed blessing.
Yeah.
Sort of said that there was, could you just elaborate a bit on that as to how exactly that structure?
No, it was a big blessing initially because, as I said, they could come out of this clutch of Gurjar Gardi, and they didn't have to do begar or forced farm labor anymore, many of them. They have their own 3-acre plot. They took 2 to 3 years to develop them into cultivable fields, and that did help. After that, there is a mixed story. There are some like Prahlad Singh. He has 4 sons. One of them is a lawyer in Meerut. Another is a munshi. Some of them could educate. They invested in education. Those whose sons were, a little more disciplined. On the other hand, there is this Mangte Ram. He also had 4 sons. He also got 3 acres. His land is sold off. There is a lot of alcoholism in the family. So that mixed picture is there. But land distribution was a big help, no doubt. That doesn't mean that they could become prosperous on that. But they could stand on their own. That is how I'll sum up. Prosperity requires non-farm, I'll repeatedly say. And in fact, there is a scope for this sought after formal jobs. Why can't we have many more doctors, or rather paramedics? Doctors won't stay in the village. But we need many more paramedics. Simple medication is required. For doctors, they can go to Kharkhoda or Meerut or 10 kilometers. But at least a simple dispensary should be there. Preventive care should be there. Some guidance should be there. We can create, there are 5 lakhs villages, about 5.5 lakh villages, 50-60,000 towns and cities. We can straight away create 6 into 4, 24 lakh jobs straight away in the public sector, which is so sought after in teaching, in paramedical help, and in municipal service and so on. So this formal sector jobs need to be expanded, no doubt, but that can happen only if the private formal sector grows, because revenues will come from where? Yeah. There was this question about morbidity. Ashwin, I was in fact talking about middle-age morbidity. Morbidity always goes up in society when life expectancy goes up, because there are many more old people. But to make it comparable and ceteris paribus, we compare only middle-age morbidity to see if the situation is worsening. So I had in my charts also asked about only heart attacks, etc. in middle age. So that is worsening, no doubt. And in fact, there are macro data also available now about diabetes, about heart problems, that is growing. We should be hugely concerned about this. This is immense deterioration in quality of life. About industrialization, Rajiv ji, okay, he has left. But actually this question is going beyond my paper, but still I'll just respond by saying that industrialization cannot create a lot of employment, I think. That will need a new work culture, like Germany did in 19th century or Japan did in early 20th century, then China is now doing it. But luckily we have the new knowledge economy, the service sector, and this can still create wealth. Plus, whatever little growth you have in industry has a much larger multiplier effect. I don't see the job of industry or manufacturers as creating many jobs, but creating more revenue and salaries, so that somebody who is an artist, like in USA, can create a CD and make enough money for life, because there is disposable income. Their job is to create wealth and taxes and revenue. Out of that, a service sector will grow up, because if people have more disposable income and government has more revenue to spend, then there is a lot more, a variety of services that will mushroom, which is not possible in a poor economy. So industry gives a push, but even a 5% rise in manufacturing has a multiplier effect. It helps the service sector also to grow hugely, and government spending to grow hugely. About education and health, there was a question. What was that? Yeah.
Your statement on acute problems, on immediate problems. And if I may plug one more question, these two villages are located on the edge of the city, so because they're spatially very close to the New Delhi administration. What is the kind of spillover effect in terms of social and cultural and maybe even political impact?
Make that precise. For example, in Dhantala, are the people who work in Delhi?
Yeah. As I said, there are in fact 120 people, I counted, 120 persons who commute daily or weekly. They come back on weekends, or they commute daily. And there is this train coming from Mohiuddinpur is the railway station next to Dhantala. It's about 10 kilometers from there. That is packed train. 3-4 trains come to Delhi and Noida, and so this commuting is helping. There is of course much better wage in Delhi. Not only unskilled wage is better, but factory jobs. As I was saying, this beggar, he comes daily and begs in Jama Masjid. He doesn't go to Meerut, because disposable incomes are, you must be knowing, Delhi's per capita income is 2,40,000 per annum, as against India's 2,40,000 per annum is Delhi's per capita income, one of the highest, and India's is I think 1,20,000 something. So Delhi's per capita income is much higher, disposable income is more. And education and health, see, they figure highly in Amartya Sen's deprivations and UN UN human development indices. Next to per capita income, they are similarly in mind. But what I am saying is that they need to be looked at in terms of privations also. They are measuring health only by life expectancy. It doesn't count adult or middle-age morbidity. Life expectancy has gone up largely because of the radical fall in IMR. So life expectancy has gone up, but simultaneously morbidity is going up. Anemia level, in fact, between NFHS, National Family Health Survey 2 and 3, 4 hasn't come out yet, anemia increased. Anemia is 50% of Indian women are anemic as compared to 3-4% in Western Europe. These are huge worries. What is the quality of life we are leading? And it is not so much because of lack of food. Now, it used to be a problem before the Green Revolution, but it's not so much food itself. But I would say one tasty food, palatable food, having just chapatis and the cheapest sitafal ki sabzi every day, or the cheapest dal, that is not a satisfactory situation. So it is not starvation or hunger in that sense, but we need to aspire more and target higher and rich, which we enjoy. Food with some variety, that is not available. In fact, I have a fear. Maybe, they are quantity wise, they take in more carbohydrates than us. This needs to be checked, but my feeling is that just number of rotis or carbohydrates, cereal intake, is higher among the poor than among the. This is partly because, of course, the laborious work they do, they need more calories, but also because they have very little else in their diet, in their menu. And this should be a worry, because this is a very unhealthy, single. And similarly in education, school attendance they are counting. How many literates, how many people. But what is this certificate mean now, 12th? You've seen the way exams are conducted. I don't know, IIT, they included 50% board exams marks in IIT admission. IIT was one thing good. Board exams the way they are conducted in UP and Bihar. I have seen on the exam day, a tree will be chopped down on the road, so that there cannot be, in any case, that no inspection team comes. But just in case. And the exam center is sold off. They have, a system of for 1 hour if you want to cheat, you will pay this much. For 2 hours, 3 hours, this much. This is this. And then, of course, Vyapam has exposed, even in professional exams. I know people who have bought seats for medical for their children. It's so common. These are huge governance lapses. And as I was saying, we are not attending enough to governance issues. We are talking too much about maybe caste and class, and these are the structural issues which are important. I'm not undermining. But governance issues is also not a rightist agenda only. This is a grave issue of public concern. This is leading to a lot of suffering on the ground. This is the point I'm trying to make.
Any last question? No? Okay. So thank you very much, Devesh, for coming today, and we look forward to see you to our next workshop on October 27. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.